Good morning. My name is Divya Pradhan, and I'm going to be talking about division of nervous system today. The functions of the nervous system are three. Sensory input, that is, information is gathered by sensory receptors about both internal and external changes. This information is sent to the brain or the central processing unit, where the sensory input is interpreted. So this is where integration takes place. 3 is the motor output. That is the activation based on the information that's come in. Activation of effector organs. I'm sorry. And the effector organs could be a muscle or a gland that produces a response. So as you can see here, the eye sees the glass of water, sends the information to the brain, where this information has to be interpreted right here. The message is interpreted and the information is sent from the brain to the muscle right here, so that the muscle can contract, pick up that glass, and you can drink water. So obviously, there are basically two parts. The central system, central processing center, or the central nervous system, we can also call it the CPU, and the other two are ones that will bring information from internal and external environment to this central processing unit, where the message or the information is interpreted, integrated, and then what it is this information is now sent to the motor neurons so that some action can be taken. So based on this information, we can now divide the nervous system into two. The central nervous system, which is the central processing unit, if you think of the body as a computer, and the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, which are responsible for the integration and form the command center. The other system is the peripheral nervous system, which actually carry messages to and from the central nervous system. So they will carry messages to the central nervous system, and there's a part which carries the message away from the central nervous system. This compromises of, or this consists of, paired spinal and cranial nerves. There are two functional divisions of the peripheral nervous system, the sensory and the motor. If you remember, the eye saw the water, sent the information to the brain, and the brain sent that information to the muscle. Remember? So here, the sensory or the afferent division transmits impulses to the central nervous system, which is the brain or the spinal cord, and consists of the somatic afferent fibers. The somatic afferent fibers, which convey impulses from the skin, from the skeletal muscles, and from the joints. And there's the visceral afferent fibers that convey messages from the visceral organs. There's the motor efferent division, which transmits impulses from the central nervous system to the effector organs. And like I said, the effector organs could be a muscle or a gland. Now we're talking about the motor division of the peripheral nervous system. Let's go back to this slide and see the motor division. We'll talk more about this motor division. Okay. So the motor division are two. Once again, just to recap, the eye sees, sends the message to the brain, and the brain sends the information to the muscles. Remember? Well, in this case, we are talking about this. the motor division. This message from the brain can go into two types of muscles. One are the voluntary or the striated muscles, okay, like your biceps and your triceps. And these will bring about conscious activities. They are under the direct control of the brain. So when I tell the brain to when the brain tells my biceps to contract, they will contract. And the second one is the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS, which controls the subconscious activity. The autonomic nervous system is that part of the peripheral nervous system that functions independently. So it functions two things: independently and, notice what I'm going to be writing, continuously, without any conscious effort. It consists of sensory and motor neurons that run between the central nervous system, especially what part of the central nervous system? The hypothalamus and the medulla oblongata. So that part of the central nervous system. So it consists of neurons, sensory and motor, that run between this, as well as the various internal organs. And the various internal organs could be the heart, the lung, viscera, glands, both exocrine and endocrine. It is responsible for monitoring conditions in the internal environment, such as blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature, and bringing about appropriate changes in them. The contraction of this both smooth muscle, like as in the stomach, and cardiac muscle, as in the heart, is controlled by the motor neurons in the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, in turn, is divided into two: sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is general action is to mobilize the body resources under stress. So whenever you are stressed out, this is the nervous system that comes into play. This will induce either fight or flight response. It releases two types of neurotransmitters. Remember, we've talked about neurotransmitters. One which is that you should be familiar with by now is the, excuse my spelling, acetylcholine. The other one that you may not be that familiar is the noradrenaline, also called the norepinephrine. The release of this norepinephrine by the sympathetic will stimulate heartbeat. Look at this, activate heartbeat, raise blood pressure, by the action of adrenaline in here, dilates the pupil so you can see better, dilates the trachea and the bronchi so you can breathe better, stimulates the conversion of glycogen into glucose so the muscles can contract and you can either run or you can fight, and shunts the blood away from the skin and the viscera to the muscle, brain, and the heart, so therefore you can think. Inhibits peristalsis and secretion. That's no time to digest right now. It's time to run or fight. And inhibits contraction of the bladder and the rectum. Obviously, you don't have time to go to the bathroom right now. It's time to fight or flight. The parasympathetic, on the other hand, this functions with the action that do not require immediate reaction. So this is specifically responsible for stimulation of activities that occur when the body is at rest. So whenever you are at rest, this is the one that comes into play. And these activities include salivation, lacrimation, that is tears, urination, digestion, and defecation. Let's remember the acronym SLUD, S-L-U-D-D, salivation, lacrimation, urination, digestion, defecation. Parasympathetic will cause slowing down of the heart, right here, lowering blood pressure, of course, if the heart rate comes down, constriction of the pupils right here, increased blood flow to the skin and viscera, and peristalsis of the GI tract, increased peristalsis of the GI tract, and so therefore you want to encourage digestion. Now, speaking of relationship between the two, parasympathetic and sympathetic, they typically function in opposition to each other. So this natural opposition is better understood as complementary. They're complementary rather than antagonistic. So rather, scientists prefer to call them complementary rather than antagonistic. For an analogy, one may think of the sympathetic division as the accelerator. So this is the accelerator of your car. And parasympathetic would be the brake. In short, the parasympathetic system returns the body functions to normal after they have been altered by the sympathetic stimulation. In times of danger, it is the sympathetic that prepares the body for violent activity. Parasympathetic system reverses these changes when the danger is over. So once again, this flow chart is available, the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and then there's a peripheral nervous system, two major divisions. The peripheral nervous system, remember, takes the information to the central nervous system and away from the central nervous system. So here is the peripheral nervous system is made up of sensory and motor. The motor itself is two, autonomic and somatic. Autonomic, on the other hand, remember somatic is voluntary, okay? So autonomic, it could be sympathetic and parasympathetic. So for more exercises and learning, you can fill in this chart that I have left here so that you can get a better understanding. So with this, we come to the end of organization of the nervous system. I thank you for giving me your time and patience and for listening to me throughout this clip.